Okay, on this Memorial Day weekend, we're looking at the subject of lifting the veil, remembering the eternal nature of life. And that's a good thing to do all the time, just to kind of keep a larger picture of what we're involved in here. Because it's very easy to get sucked into what's right in front of our nose, all the issues that we have going on a daily basis. With Memorial Day coming up, our thoughts turn to those who gave their lives in service to our country, from military to first responders. Many of us who haven't lost loved ones in the line of duty will remember those we have lost in other ways, and we'll think of them as continuing on their unique path. And that's how I remember Memorial Day, is we would go to the cemetery, because we had no people in service that lost their lives. We had people in service, but nobody was killed that was close to in the family. But we would always use that day to go to the grave of somebody else, that somebody else in the family. So that's how I always thought of Memorial Day, and I didn't, as a kid, really understand the larger picture. And I've been asked many times, what I think about military and all of that. I am very grateful that we have one, and also sad that we have to have a defense like this. But I don't think we're going to not need it anytime soon. I think it's just kind of the nature of the human being that we don't get along. For whatever reason, we want what somebody else has or whatever, but I'm not anti-military at all. I was not in the military, and I'm not really trying to make a political statement here. I'm just saying I don't want to take the locks off my doors either. I believe in self-defense. I believe in using your brain to, be aware of what's going on. And there's some pretty strange customers on this planet, in case you haven't noticed. Maybe you're one of them, I don't know. But I've had my life threatened in the ministry, of all places. And I've been in several situations that were pretty scary. So I always appreciated the people that came forward and helped, in those kinds of situations. And when we get into that kind of a thing with a nation, I'm glad that we have the ability to address whatever we need to do. While we continue to associate death with pain and sorrow, we're slowly opening our collective consciousness to the ongoing nature of life. From this earthly perspective, we see death as an end. And that's one thing I notice still as a country, as a group of people, that we put a very negative view of death. We call, when somebody is killed in service, it's the ultimate sacrifice and all of that. And it just has a negative feel to it. And what I think we ought to be doing in a time like this is rethinking what that is, what passing is. Nobody's going to get off this planet alive. I don't know if you've come to grips with that or not, but we all are going to go in some way. And none of us have been in, the service where we lost our life, obviously. But that's one way that it's done. I have read a number of near-death experiences of military people running over a bomb or something, and having a near-death experience as the result, saying it was the best thing that ever happened to them. And that goes against everything that we think and believe. But I think I guess what I have tried to do is look at this whole issue of what happens when we die, and is it a bad thing? And so, that's kind of what we ought to be looking at each year, I think, when we come to a place like this. We're learning from those who have momentarily lifted this veil that there is no end. There's change, but there's no death. So that goes against all appearances. We see a cemetery full of gravestones, and it sure looks like there's death. But we're looking at the physical side of it only. And the whole spiritual path is about lifting up our eyes and learning to see further. I have no doubt in my mind that when this body goes, that I'll still be doing something. I'm not sure what. Probably won't be doing this exactly, but maybe I'll be in your position listening to somebody talk about this. But I don't think I'll end, with the body. I have a very strong feeling. I can't prove it, but I think I will be able to say I told you so, whenever I get to that point, if I can communicate with you. But I think we're all kind of on the same page anyway in that regard. So I'm not out to convince anybody. This has been my journey, and it's losing someone or something is not easy to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. When a loved one steps from our life, we suffer the pain and shock of the pain of shock and loss. I had experienced this with pets and with grandparents, but the loss of our son and then my mother the same year revealed a whole different level of loss. The grieving period is a time of readjustment. Hopefully we gradually move from what we lost to what we gained through the relationship. And that was always kind of one of the lines I would use in a funeral service. We give thanks for all the good we got in this relationship, all the good experiences we had in this relationship, and that grieving period is really tough, because all we focus on is what we lost. And I think it's natural, and we should do that. We should go through that period. When we lost our son, I remember just one morning, a couple days after, I saw some of his pictures that Beth had brought up as a baby and a young kid and all that, and it just opened up something in me that just was very difficult to look at that and deal with that. I never had that kind of experience, that level of experience. As a kid, I would lose a dog or a cat, and I would mourn for a long time. It was very hard. That's why I don't want a dog now. We got cats, they live 20 years. I hope they all outlive me. But that's a very difficult thing, as all of you know, to lose a pet, even. But a family member, a child, a parent, both those things are extremely difficult. But we don't want to stay there. We don't want to stay in that grieving place. So at some point we need to shift into the blessings that we received, in that relationship, because there are many. When I think of Ashley and my mother, I do not think of them as dead. I wonder what they might be experiencing in their new life. And this is not simply an attempt to help myself feel better. It's grounded in the understanding that they continue to live. I absolutely believe that. And again, I've never had connection with them or anything like that. I am open to that. Maybe they'll show up in a dream. My mother has shown up a couple times in dreams, and I guess Ashley did too. But he was a kid. He was a baby. And I don't know if they came with a message or not. I don't want to overinterpret dreams I have. So I think if they want to get hold of me, they will. I know my mother always would, so I don't think she probably has changed any, and so would Ashley. My last text message to him was, "Are you okay?" And I didn't hear from him again. It was maybe a month later that we found out he passed. When I asked him that, it was because he was not feeling well. It had nothing to do with his actual passing. But, you don't know when that's going to happen. With my mother, it was a little easier, and actually the last month of her life, she was really miserable. And so it was a blessing when she finally did cut loose and took off, because it's got to be better. She just was really struggling. And I hated to see that. My sister put me on a video conference call with her, and she recognized me and I recognized her, but we were very different. So you could just tell that it was coming to a close. With our son, I got a call one day that a friend of his told me they found him dead. So it was a complete shock, just absolutely unexpected. So that took a lot more to deal with, and I really can appreciate anybody going through that, that is going through that. But some of Ashley's friends are still struggling very hard with his death, with his passing, because he was young and he was very much alive to them. Somebody commented the other day on the program I left on YouTube, when he passed, and so people keep coming up once in a while saying we sure miss him and all of that. So there's that side of it, and I don't think there's a cure for that. I didn't realize how powerful it was till it hit that close to home. And I've done many funerals where that happened. I've had kids that shot themselves. It was an 11-year-old boy that shot himself, and parents were just devastated. And I can't even, I can now begin to comprehend that. Imagine what they were going through. But I've done several services where I had to be the voice of reason and the voice of, trying to make some sense out of what seemed like a senseless experience in some cases. And that's not always easy to do. I'm not sure I could do it any better. I can just do it from experience now. And not that I am happy to have had that, but, it's just, I think about death a lot, which means I think about life. What is this thing called life? Death is something that the death of the body is something we'll all go through, we'll all experience. But how do we think of that? And what do we do with that idea? Death sounds like it's such an end. And it's up to us, to really delve into what is this thing? And I don't have to go by what somebody tells me or what I read or whatever. I can know for myself. And I just feel very good about the research I've done and listening to people. There's no doubt, in my own spiritual experience, there's no doubt there's something much more to us than this physical body. But we talk about this ultimate sacrifice, and I think that's one of the things I struggle with. Like someone in the military or whatever, you sign up for this and it could happen, you could lose your life doing this, but you could lose your life driving to church. We've had a couple of close calls with a vehicle just driving across town. You never know when that's going to happen, and I'm not undermining that at all, because again, I think it's very important, and I think we're all sitting here in this church having this experience because somebody was willing to fight for it. It's just that's where we are as human beings at this stage, and there's people that would love to take over this country, and I don't want to hand it over to somebody else. I want to know that we're going to be okay. I don't want to hand over my house to home intruders either. It's the same kind of thing. It's just, to me, it's common sense. I want to live this life as free from fear of that as I possibly can. And I think the idea of peace through strength is a good one, and I've always felt that. And you may or may not agree with it. I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying, where I'm coming from. So the ultimate sacrifice, this guy was supposed to have made it, the guy on the left of the screen. We're told that Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice, but he's sitting at the right hand of God. So what did he sacrifice? He's got a pretty good place. And God says, shouldn't you be getting back down there? And what's Jesus say? That's okay, I'm good. I don't want to go back down there. So he knows what it's like to go through some hard stuff. And I don't think that the second coming was his idea, frankly. I think it was for the people that thought he didn't do the job in the first place, so he's got to come back. But so when you think of the ultimate sacrifice, just that story, he died a horrible death, but then he we're told that he goes up and he sits at the right hand of God. That can't be too bad, to have that kind of a payoff. And I think he does say that. That's okay, I'm good, because he's been sitting up there for 2,000 years. He's not wanting to come back. So many NDEers express surprise when they realize they're technically dead. I think that's really funny. I'll listen to people tell their stories, and they won't even understand that they're dead. The surprise comes from the fact that they are still very much alive. They only know something has changed because no one can hear them explain that they're perfectly fine. Everybody else should calm down. There was a guy, he was an MD, or he is an MD, he's still going. But he was at a family picnic, and he got back, you remember payphones? We had payphones. He was on a payphone by a lake, and there was a storm brewing over the lake. He was not looking that direction, he was looking the other direction. But the bolt of lightning came down, hit the phone, comes out of the phone, goes through his brain and out his foot. Blew, some of his toes off, I think, but he was down instantly. He was in La La Land, he was somewhere else. But he was standing at the foot of these stairs that he went down to make the phone call. And his mother-in-law was screaming at the top of her lungs, and he couldn't figure out why. He kept trying to tell her, what's wrong with you? Calm down. She ran right through him. And he looked over, and there he was on the ground, gone. Fortunately, there was another person waiting to make a call, and she was a registered nurse. So she did some CPR and whatever, got him back. He had this incredible experience in the meantime. Got him back, and he said he opened his eyes, and he told her, I'm okay, I'll be okay, I'm an MD. Like, she said, yeah, really? But in other words, he was a person that didn't think much about this stuff. And here he finds himself in a completely different world. He said, I could not figure out how in the world I could be there and here at the same time. And I had somebody else ask me that. They saw themselves curled up on their bed from the ceiling, and asked what I thought, who was me? Which one was me? The one on the ceiling or the one on the bed? And I said, I think the one that was doing the looking probably is you, and that was the one by the ceiling. So, but all these cases, they don't see themselves as dead. Just absolutely don't buy it, don't see it, don't understand it. So that to me is where we need to focus, not to try to get out of this life. That's what another one said. That she said, the thing I have against New Age and all this meditation stuff is we close our eyes to try to escape the body, to try to escape this earth, to try to escape this life, try to rise above it. Well, if we want to rise above it, why did we come here in the first place? The object is to experience it, to be here and to enjoy it, but to live with the awareness that there's a bigger picture. This is not all there is. And that to me is, I've said, behind every holiday that we have, there's some spiritual principle, and I think a Memorial Day is a time to get that bigger picture, to think about it, to realize that, yes, there are people that have made the ultimate sacrifice for the country from the earthly point of view, but what kind of experience are they actually having, when they go on? And from all that I have gathered, they're having an incredible experience. Most of them don't want to come back, especially in military. The one soldier was talking about being under fire and just being absolutely terrified by being in a foxhole, and it looked like there was no escape while he was shot. And he said it was such a relief. He's standing outside of his body, and it felt like such a relief to be free of that. And we don't think of it from that point of view. I've heard people talk about being murdered. Same thing. They actually gave thanks for their murders. And that goes against everything that we think, that we think would even be possible to do. One guy was in a motorcycle accident, and he said, I was lucky enough to be killed. And he had this incredible experience. He's out now. He's a medium. And he's traveling around the country telling people about, this larger experience that's out there. The guy that, the MD that was hit by lightning, he said, I grew up with rock music. And suddenly, I started having a craving for classical music. And he went to a store, bought a bunch of classical CDs, started listening, and then he started playing the piano. He got into a whole different thing. Something in him opened up that he had forgotten that he had or whatever. He doesn't even know how it happened, but he hired an instructor to show him how to play the piano. She said, I'll teach you if you will stop playing like you're playing now. That's like I play piano. I know how to hit notes. I don't play a piano, but I've learned the wrong way, Diane would tell you instantly. And that if I was to sit down with someone like her and have her show me how to actually do it, that'd be a bigger challenge than taking somebody that's never learned the wrong way. But that's kind of how we do with life itself. We've learned a lot of wrong ways to do it, a lot of wrong ways to think about it. And death is probably one of the biggest ones that we have learned that about. It's a bad, negative thing. What are the two worst things that can happen? Taxes and death are two sure things that happen. It's like we put those two things in the same category. But a person who has a near-death experience doesn't do that. They put that in a very positive place. One universal takeaway from their experience is the loss of the fear of death. And that's a big thing, the fear of death. While the average person may think death is the worst thing that could happen, the typical NDEer will insist that their brush with death was the best thing that ever happened to them. The loss of the fear of death seems to spark a new enthusiasm for living life. And that's what you hear in these stories regularly. It's almost a universal response. People may have been drug addicts, they may have been just, living at the bottom of their life, and something happens, they get killed. They have one of these experiences, and they come back and they get rid of all that. They step out of that whole way of thinking and have a new love for life, new appreciation for life, because they got a shot of the bigger picture. And that's really what we want, and technically, that's what meditation will give us if we learn to stay with it long enough, where it opens the mind to something much bigger than what's right in front of our nose, what we see with the eye and hear with the ear. But, we're not trying to escape this, we're trying to understand it, because earth life is not limited as we often think it is. It's our thinking around it, it's our perspective of it. And, if there's ways that we can expand that thinking, letting go and just exploring, reading, listening to people that have stepped beyond, I just find that has been a superb education. And I know it has helped with with the loss of our son. It helped a lot. There was about 3 days I just totally lost it. And then I came around. I think it was King David. In the Bible, lost his son, and he mourned for a long time. And then one day he gets up, washes his face, and that's it. He did enough. And that's kind of what I felt. And it doesn't mean you don't miss him. It doesn't mean, you kind of wish it hadn't happened. I think about calling my mother still. I'd call her on Sunday afternoon or just any afternoon, and she was always there. She would repeat herself constantly, but that was all right. I didn't have to make up anything new to say, But, I still think about that, and I really miss it. And but I don't, like Houdini, he was very set on contacting his mother after she passed. I don't feel that way. I feel like When I left home, I was 17 years old, and I've shared this story. I share it usually in the funeral services. My parents let me go. I had a singing job in a nightclub, and my parents were probably the last two people that thought that was a good idea. But they let me go, and she has since left. I don't think she's probably singing in a nightclub, but she might be. I don't know what she might be doing. But I let her go. I don't want to cling to her. I don't want her to think, or him, Ashley, to think that we're clinging to them at all. Because, what we might cling to is no longer there. But the soul, the reason we would cling in the first place is still there, still having the experience. So that's what I think a Memorial Day thought pattern ought to be like. Just think of things in a different way in this regard. My interest in the NDE is not an obsession with death. As I've said many times, I see this emerging body of information as a window into the soul. I do not think there is a remedy for our feeling of loss. I do think the more willing we become to lift the veil of this thing we call death, the better we understand this other thing we call life. And I truly believe that. And I get obsessed with things for a reason. The reason the NDE has attracted me is there's a message there that I need to learn, I need to hear. And it has been a very broadening experience. I don't really want to get involved in a group of people that share their experiences and all. I might sometime, if I had a near-death experience, I might want to do that. But I don't necessarily want to make a group thing out of it. I just am glad that people are talking about it, that this other way of seeing this side of life is being presented to us in a way that is accessible. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.